Imagine this. You're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling long after midnight. The room is silent, but your mind is not. A single thought wanders in, uninvited, almost mocking. Why am I like this? You replay the day, every glance, every word, every hesitation. That time you spoke too quickly, that time you stayed quiet when you wanted to speak, that smile that seemed fake, even though you swore it was genuine. You watch your own life from above, as though you're both the actor and the critic, constantly shifting roles until you no longer know which one is real. And here is the strangest part. You know exactly what you're doing. You can see the loops and spirals, you can name the flaws, you can diagnose the wounds, yet none of that knowledge frees you. If anything, it makes the chains tighter. You are not lost because you are blind. You are lost because you see too much. Isn't that the paradox? The more you become self-aware, the more you begin to unravel yourself. Awareness was supposed to be the cure, wasn't it? Awareness was supposed to be the light in the dark room, the answer to the endless cycle of mistakes and regrets. Yet here you are, sitting in that light, and it blinds more than it reveals. Think about it. Awareness can tell you that you're anxious, but it doesn't silence the anxiety. It tells you you're addicted, but it doesn't weaken the craving. It tells you you're lonely, but it doesn't summon companionship. It tells you your mind is broken in 1,000 small, complicated ways, but it does not piece you back together. So what is the point of this burden called self-awareness? Maybe you've noticed it too, that haunting sense that your mind watches itself like a predator stalking prey. Every word you speak feels rehearsed. Every decision is followed by an invisible commentary. Every desire is cross-examined like it's on trial. Do you even want what you want? Not. Or are you only pretending? Do you truly believe what you say? Or have you memorized the script society handed you? It is exhausting, like living with an inner interrogator who never sleeps. And here's the more unsettling question. What if that interrogator is right? What if most of what you believe about yourself is an illusion? What if the voice that accuses you is not simply paranoia, but a kind of brutal truth you can't escape? If that's the case, then what is the self you are so aware of? This is where the ground begins to shake, because the more you dissect yourself, the more slippery your identity becomes. Every motive reveals a hidden motive beneath it, like a trapdoor opening to another trapdoor, endlessly. I help people because I'm kind, you think. But then you hear the second voice. No, you help people because you want to feel superior, because you want approval, because you can't stand to be disliked. And then comes the third voice. But maybe that's not true either. Maybe you're just overthinking it. Which one is you? You look in the mirror, but the reflection feels dishonest. Not because the glass is broken, but because the very idea of a fixed you starts to crumble. You realize you can never observe yourself without also shaping the observation, never uncover your motives without changing them simply by looking. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, or trying to taste your own tongue. The act itself distorts the truth. Now imagine carrying this hyper-clarity everywhere you go. In conversations, you're not only speaking, you're analyzing how you're speaking. At work, you're not only performing, you're critiquing your performance in real time. Even in solitude, when you think you're finally safe, you're haunted by the question, why am I thinking this right now? Do you feel it yet? The unbearable weight of seeing too much. Because here lies the great contradiction. The more you know yourself, the less solid you become. Knowledge does not anchor you, it dissolves you. And yet, isn't self-knowledge supposed to be the highest virtue? Every philosopher, every spiritual teacher, every therapist whispers the same refrain: know yourself. Socrates declared it the foundation of wisdom. Jung called it the path toward individuation. Modern psychology insists it's the key to growth. And yet, when you take this advice too far, you find yourself standing in front of a mirror that reflects endlessly, an infinite hallway of selves collapsing into one another until nothing stable remains. So which is it? Is self-awareness the way forward? Or is it the trap? Perhaps you've felt that strange emptiness too. You go out into the world, carrying your insight like armor, but the armor is heavy, and you begin to envy those who are blissfully unaware. People who laugh without analyzing why they're laughing. People who fall in love without psychoanalyzing attachment styles. People who live without asking whether life is worth living. Ignorance looks like freedom when you are trapped in awareness. But then another paradox appears, doesn't it? Because if you envy the blind simplicity of ignorance, then aren't you already caught in a contradiction? To long for blindness is itself a sign of how deeply you see. You cannot go back. Once your mind has split open to its own complexity, there is no undoing it. So here you stand, aware of your awareness, suspicious of your suspicions, doubting your own doubts. A hall of mirrors with no exit. And now the question grows larger, more urgent, more unbearable. If too much self-awareness dissolves the self, then what remains of you when the reflection finally shatters? That is the question, the one that hovers like a ghost behind every sleepless night, every anxious thought, every spiral of doubt. It is the question philosophers hinted at, psychologists tried to untangle, and mystics warned about. What happens when your mind turns its gaze entirely inward and finds no stable ground to stand on? The paradox is alive in you. You can feel it, and whether you like it or not, it is dragging you somewhere deeper, into questions you may not want to face, into truths that might unsettle you even more. Because what if the very thing you thought would liberate you, the ability to see yourself clearly, is the very thing that enslaves you? And if that is true, then what force is at work here? What hidden law of the psyche makes awareness a burden rather than a gift? That is where we must go next, into the roots of this problem, into the psychological and philosophical forces that gave birth to this strange torment, into the uncomfortable truth that maybe, just maybe, self-awareness is not the light we were promised, but a fire that can burn the very hands that hold it. Self-awareness, at first glance, looks like a gift, a sharpened tool of the mind, allowing you to step outside yourself, observe your patterns, and supposedly grow. But when the blade becomes too sharp, it cuts not only the illusions, but the very fabric of your being. To understand why this happens, we must descend into the roots, into psychology, into philosophy, into the ancient wrestlings of thinkers who warned us of both the promise and peril of knowing ourselves. The problem beneath the problem. The problem with self-awareness is not that you see yourself. It is that once you begin to see, you cannot stop. Awareness multiplies. It does not remain a single lens. It splits, fragments, doubles back on itself. You are no longer just aware. You are aware that you are aware. And soon you are aware that you are aware that you are aware. A spiral begins, and you are caught in it. Psychologists call this metacognition, the ability to think about thinking. It is one of the defining features of human consciousness, separating us from animals that live instinctively. But while metacognition gives rise to language, culture, art, and morality, it also breeds self-consciousness, anxiety, and the inescapable question, what is the point of me? Most people quiet this loop with distraction, entertainment, routine, small pleasures. But if you are too self-aware, those distractions lose their power. You cannot silence the loop because the loop is aware of itself. The hidden problem, then, is not self-awareness itself. It is the infinite regress it unleashes. Jung and the tyranny of the shadow. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." To him, self-awareness was the noble task of dragging the unseen forces of the psyche into the light. The shadow, our repressed desires, fears, and impulses, was not an enemy, but a forgotten sibling, waiting to be acknowledged. But here's the danger Jung himself hinted at. What happens when you bring so much into the light that you are blinded by it? What happens when every shadow is scrutinized, every thought dissected, every impulse questioned? Instead of integrating your shadow, you risk becoming consumed by it, circling endlessly in analysis without resolution. In other words, too much light becomes another form of darkness. Nietzsche and the abyss. Nietzsche, with his merciless gaze, saw this danger clearly. He warned, when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. The abyss here is not only the world's chaos, but the chaos within. To turn awareness inward endlessly is to risk being swallowed by the void of your own self-questioning. Nietzsche valued self-overcoming, the transformation of the self into something higher, but he despised the paralysis of overanalysis. He saw that too much reflection can corrode the instinct to act. It is one thing to examine your motives, it is another to neuter them with endless suspicion. This is why Nietzsche mocked excessive philosophers as sick thinkers, trapped in their own webs. He would have seen the over-aware mind as a creature that devours itself in thought, unable to live, unable to leap. Schopenhauer and the Curse of Consciousness. Arthur Schopenhauer was even bleaker. To him, consciousness itself was a tragic mistake of nature, a cruel trick played on an otherwise blind will to live. Animals, he observed, are spared from existential torment because they simply are. They do not stand outside themselves, questioning meaning. They eat, they fight, they mate, and then they die, unburdened. But humans see, and in seeing, they suffer. The very capacity to reflect on existence makes life heavier. Schopenhauer believed this was why art, music, and beauty matter so much. They are brief escapes from the prison of consciousness, small respites from the torment of self-awareness. If you feel too aware, too painfully conscious of every flaw, every motive, every fleeting moment of existence, then in some sense you are living out the very curse Schopenhauer described. The problem is not you, the problem is consciousness itself. Sartre and the Trap of Freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist, added another cruel twist. The more aware you are, the more you realize how free you are. At first this sounds liberating, until you realize that freedom is a burden. Imagine standing in front of a menu with infinite options. You can choose anything, yet the sheer weight of choice paralyzes you. Sartre called this anguish, the dizziness of realizing you are the author of your own existence, that no excuses, no external authority, no destiny can save you from the responsibility of choosing. The over-aware mind feels this anguish constantly. Every decision is no longer just a decision. It is a referendum on your identity, your values, your essence. Should you speak or remain silent? Either choice shapes who you are becoming. Should you take this job, pursue that relationship, leave this city? Every action is magnified into a statement about your being. Awareness here is not clarity, it is terror, because the spotlight of freedom is merciless. Viktor Frankl and the search for meaning. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the concentration camps, offered a counterpoint. He believed that even in suffering, especially in suffering, meaning can be found. His philosophy, logotherapy, suggested that self-awareness should not spiral inward infinitely but outward toward purpose. Awareness, he argued, should serve something greater: love, work, courage, transcendence. Yet even Frankl's insight can become twisted for the hyper-aware, because once you know you must find meaning, you can no longer rest. Every moment becomes a test. Am I living meaningfully enough? Am I wasting time? Am I fulfilling my purpose? And once again, the loop tightens. The search for meaning itself becomes another prison. Society's role in the spiral. But it is not only philosophy and psychology that deepen the trap, it is modern society itself. We live in an age of mirrors. Social media ensures you are constantly aware of how you look, how you are perceived, how your life compares. Every post is a performance. Every click is feedback. Every interaction is data to be analyzed. The culture does not encourage being. It demands watching yourself being. In this way, the world trains you to live in a state of constant self-surveillance. You are both the prisoner and the guard. And the more sensitive, intelligent, or introspective you are, the more vicious this surveillance becomes, because while others I slip into distraction, you cannot. You see the game being played, and seeing it strips the pleasure from it. The Great Diagnosis. Here then is the hidden root. Self-awareness is not inherently a curse. The curse arises when self-awareness loses its balance, when it feeds on itself instead of guiding you outward. It is when awareness becomes obsession, when introspection becomes dissection, when knowing yourself becomes doubting yourself endlessly. You are not alone in this. The great thinkers wrestled with it. Jung tried to reconcile it. Nietzsche tried to transcend it. Schopenhauer mourned it. Sartre sharpened it into freedom. Frankl sought to redeem it with meaning, and yet none of them fully escaped the trap. They only offered glimpses of ways through it. So the question grows heavier. If awareness itself is the problem, then what happens if you cannot turn it off? If you are condemned to this heightened sensitivity, what is the price you will pay for it? That is where we must go next, into the unseen consequences, into the quiet, corrosive ways this over-awareness reshapes your life, your relationships, your very sense of reality. Awareness begins as a light in the darkness, but when that light grows too intense, it does not illuminate, it burns. The unseen consequence of too much self-awareness is not simply discomfort, it is the quiet reshaping of your entire existence. Like water carving stone, it wears away at who you are until you no longer know where the river ends and the rock begins. Let us peel back these layers, one by one, and witness what happens when awareness metastasizes. The prison of inaction. The first and most obvious consequence is paralysis. When every action carries the weight of analysis, action itself becomes unbearable. You hesitate before speaking because you anticipate how it will sound, how it will be interpreted, how it will echo in your memory hours later. You hesitate before choosing because you imagine the 100 alternate realities where you chose differently. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis, but that phrase feels too sterile for the agony it represents. In reality, it feels like drowning in possibility. You cannot act because every action has already been deconstructed into its possible motives and outcomes before you even begin. You live not in the moment, but in a hall of mirrors reflecting infinite versions of the moment. And so you stop moving. You become a thinker who does not live, a dreamer who does not act. Nietzsche despised this. He called it a sickness of the will, a kind of intellectual cowardice masquerading as depth. To him, thought without action was rot, a refusal of life itself. But if you are too self-aware, you don't refuse life intentionally. You are simply trapped in the gears of your own mind, unable to step forward. Relationships through glass. The second consequence is subtler but more devastating. Your relationships begin to feel artificial. When you are hyper-aware, you cannot simply be with others. You are always observing yourself being with them. Every joke you tell is immediately critiqued. Every smile is dissected. Every silence is filled not with presence but with self-conscious commentary. And this changes how others experience you. People may feel your hesitation, your distance, your sense of performance. They may even accuse you of being cold or detached, not realizing that beneath the glass wall of your awareness is not coldness but too much heat. You are burning inside, scanning, analyzing, monitoring, unable to rest. In time, this distance can breed loneliness. You long for intimacy, but intimacy requires surrender, the ability to forget yourself in the presence of another. If you cannot forget yourself, you cannot fully give yourself, and so you remain half-present, always hovering slightly outside your own skin, always relating through glass. Is it any wonder that those who are most self-aware often feel the most alienated? The endless trial. Another consequence emerges. You become both judge and prisoner of your own psyche. Imagine a courtroom that never closes. Every thought is summoned as evidence. Every feeling is cross-examined. Every action is put on trial. And you are both the prosecutor and the defendant, endlessly debating your own worth. This internal trial has no final verdict. You may acquit yourself one day only to condemn yourself the next. Even joy becomes suspicious. If you feel happiness, the interrogator whispers, "Are you truly happy, or are you pretending?" If you feel love, it asks, "Is this real love, or just need, or just projection?" The result is a constant sense of guilt, not for crimes committed, but for existing without clarity. You feel guilty for not knowing yourself enough, guilty for not being authentic enough, guilty for being human in a way that resists perfect understanding. This is the weight Dostoevsky described when he wrote of Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, a man trapped not only by his actions, but by the endless torment of analyzing them. Awareness does not set him free, it chains him deeper. The collapse of spontaneity. One of the great tragedies of over-awareness is the death of spontaneity. Think of children playing. They do not pause to wonder if their laughter is genuine, if their movements are graceful, if their fun is meaningful. They simply play. Spontaneity is the natural state of being unobserved. But once you are too self-aware, spontaneity withers. You no longer laugh freely, you monitor your laughter. You no longer speak freely, you measure each word. You no longer move freely, you wonder how your movement appears. Even creativity suffers, because instead of creating, you critique as you go. The result is a kind of premature aging of the soul. You become too careful, too calculated, too scripted. Life loses its rawness and becomes performance art, staged for an audience that may not even exist. And yet, you crave spontaneity. You long for the ability to lose yourself, but the very longing makes it impossible because you are now aware of your longing. Addiction to escape. Here lies another consequence. When self-awareness becomes unbearable, you will do anything to escape it. For some, the escape is addiction: alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling. For others, it is endless entertainment, constant busyness, compulsive scrolling, shallow pleasures. The goal is the same: to shut off the inner observer, to drown out the voice that will not stop analyzing. Gabor Mate, the physician who studied addiction, often said, "The question is not why the addiction, but why the pain." And for the hyper-aware, the pain is precisely this: the inability to rest within one's own skin. Addiction is not simply a search for pleasure, it is a desperate flight from the unbearable weight of self-consciousness. And here lies the cruel irony. The more aware you are of your attempt to escape, the less effective the escape becomes. You know exactly why you drink, why you scroll, why you numb yourself, and this knowledge taints the relief. Even your escape is contaminated by awareness. Cultural madness. The consequences extend beyond the individual. When enough people live in this state, society itself begins to change. We become a culture obsessed with self-image, self-presentation, self-surveillance. Social media is the perfect mirror for the hyper-aware age. Every meal photographed, every thought broadcast, every life curated for invisible spectators. We no longer live to live, we live to appear. And yet, beneath the curated images lies the same torment: the gnawing sense of being fake, the inability to feel authentic, the silent exhaustion of constant self-monitoring. Our culture encourages self-awareness but never teaches us how to carry it without collapsing. It rewards performance but peace. Diminishes vulnerability. It trains us to be mirrors, not humans. The silent despair. All these consequences culminate in a kind of silent despair. Not the dramatic despair of tragedy, but the quiet erosion of meaning. You begin to ask yourself, what's the point? If every motive can be doubted, if every action is a performance, if every pleasure is contaminated by awareness, then what remains that is real? You may still smile, still work, still play your role, but beneath it all runs the undercurrent of emptiness. This is what Kierkegaard called the sickness unto death. Not physical death, but the slow death of the self through despair. The despair of not being able to be yourself because you are too aware of yourself. And yet, this despair is invisible to most. From the outside, you may appear intelligent, thoughtful, even wise. But inside, the walls are closing in. The mind is eating itself. The urgency of escape. Here, then, is the great danger. If left unchecked, over-awareness does not simply make life uncomfortable, it makes it unbearable. It corrodes spontaneity, isolates relationships, paralyzes action, feeds addiction, and erodes meaning. And once you see this clearly, the urgency becomes undeniable. Something must change. A rebellion must occur. Because if you do not rebel against this spiral, you will be consumed by it. The question, then, is how? How do you break free from a prison built not of walls but of mirrors? How do you live when your very awareness threatens to suffocate you? The answer lies not in turning the light off, for once lit, it cannot be extinguished. The answer lies in learning to hold the light differently, to rebel against its tyranny, to transform awareness from a burden into a weapon. This is where we must go next. The rebellion. You've seen it now, the weight, the paralysis, the quiet despair of carrying too much awareness. You know the mirrors, the courtroom, the endless commentary. But knowledge of the trap is not the same as escaping it. The spiral does not dissolve just because you name it. In fact, naming it often makes it more real. So the rebellion cannot be ordinary. It cannot be a polite coping mechanism, a self-help platitude, or a quick-fix distraction. To break free from the tyranny of over-awareness requires something more radical, a defiance of the very structure that keeps you imprisoned. Step 1. Refusing the courtroom. The first act of rebellion is refusing the endless trial. Your inner judge thrives on one thing: your participation. It presents arguments, evidence, questions, accusations, and you play along. You defend, you explain, you counterattack. But what if you stopped? What if instead of cross-examining every thought, you let it pass like smoke? This is not the same as denial. It is refusal. Refusal to engage in an unwinnable game. Refusal to believe that every thought deserves a verdict. Imagine a courtroom where the defendant simply walks out, leaving the judge shouting into emptiness. That is the rebellion, no longer attending your own trial. This is where mindfulness, stripped of cliches, becomes revolutionary. Not as a relaxation technique, but as defiance, the radical decision to let the mind chatter without chasing it, without answering, without bowing to its authority. Step 2. Choosing action over certainty. Over-awareness demands certainty. It tells you not to act until you have the perfect motive, the flawless reason, the absolute clarity. But that certainty never arrives. It is an illusion. So the rebellion is to act without waiting, to leap while still uncertain, to speak while still doubting, to move while still questioning. This is Nietzsche's challenge: to live dangerously, to affirm life not by dissecting it endlessly, but by throwing yourself into it. Action is the antidote to paralysis, not perfect action, not justified action, but any action. Because in acting, you create clarity. In moving, you generate meaning. Awareness will still whisper, still critique, still question, but it loses its stranglehold when confronted with the raw fact of movement. Step 3. Practicing forgetting. One of the strangest forms of wisdom is learning to forget. Nietzsche once praised the ability to forget as essential to life itself. Without forgetting, we drown in the weight of memory, of analysis, of self-consciousness. To forget, in this sense, is not ignorance, it is survival. The rebellion, then, is to practice intentional forgetting, not erasing your past, but refusing to carry it endlessly, not scrutinizing every motive, but allowing some to remain mysterious, not interrogating every emotion, but letting it wash through you without explanation. In forgetting, you give yourself permission to live without always knowing why, and that permission is a kind of freedom. Step 4. Redirecting the gaze. Self-awareness turns your gaze inward endlessly. The rebellion is to turn it outward. Notice what happens when you become fully absorbed in something outside yourself. Art, music, a task that consumes your attention, a conversation that pulls you in. In those moments, self-awareness fades. You are not thinking about living, you are simply living. Frankl understood this. His answer to suffering was not endless self-reflection, but purpose, something beyond the self. Love, responsibility, creativity, these were not escapes from awareness, but redirections of it. The self cannot bear its own weight for long. It must serve something greater. So the rebellion is to anchor yourself in outward devotion, to a craft, to a cause, and to another human being, to beauty itself. To live for something beyond your own reflection. Step 5. Embracing the shadow, not fighting it. Jung's insight becomes crucial here. The parts of yourself you most fear, your impulses, your desires, your contradictions, will not dissolve just because you analyze them. Awareness cannot annihilate the shadow. It can only integrate it. The rebellion, then, is not against your shadow, but against your rejection of it. To allow yourself to be flawed, to accept that some motives are selfish, some desires are messy, some thoughts are dark, and that this does not make you broken, it makes you human. This acceptance breaks the cycle of endless suspicion. When you no longer need to justify every motive, you are free to live with your contradictions. You stop hunting for purity and start embracing complexity. Step 6. Rituals of release. Rebellion is not only philosophical, it must be embodied. The over-aware mind needs moments where awareness is transcended, where thought is silenced, not by suppression, but by immersion. Throughout history, humans have turned to ritual for this reason. Dance, music, prayer, fasting, physical exertion, even altered states. These were not mere superstitions, but technologies of release, ways of stepping outside the relentless commentary of the self. For you, it may not be ritual in the traditional sense. It may be running until your body overtakes your mind. It may be painting until hours vanish. It may be singing, meditating, or even sitting in nature until the chatter quiets. The form does not matter. What matters is that you create spaces where awareness loosens its grip, where you taste the freedom of being unobserved. Step 7. Humor as weapon. One of the most overlooked rebellions against over-awareness is humor. The hyper-aware mind takes itself with deadly seriousness. Every thought feels weighty, every choice feels monumental, but humor punctures this illusion. It exposes the absurdity of over-analysis. Imagine laughing at your own spirals, treating them as comically exaggerated performances rather than existential verdicts. Suddenly, the tyrant loses power, the loop becomes a clown show, and in that laughter, you reclaim some of your freedom. Nietzsche himself once wrote, "Perhaps I know best why it is man alone who laughs. He alone suffers so deeply that he had to invent laughter." Humor, then, is not frivolous. It is salvation. Step 8. Choosing depth without drowning. The final rebellion is learning balance, choosing depth without letting it swallow you. Depth is beautiful. To question, to reflect, to examine the human condition, these are noble acts, but the danger is drowning in them. The rebellion is to know when to stop digging, when to surface, when to live on the ground instead of the abyss. This balance is not taught, it is practiced. You will stumble, you will overthink, you will spiral again, but each time you learn to return more quickly, to refuse the courtroom, to act without certainty, to redirect your gaze outward. You learn to carry awareness not as a curse, but as a tool, sharp enough to cut lies, but sheathed when not in use. The revolutionary shift. If you have followed this far, you may feel something stirring. A strange sense that the prison is not impenetrable after all, that you can, in fact, defy the spiral. This is the heart of the rebellion, realizing that self-awareness does not have to own you. You can learn to wield it, to play with it, to laugh at it, to redirect it, to let it rest. You can move from being the prisoner of mirrors to the one who chooses when to look and when to live. And this shift, this reclaiming of awareness as a servant rather than a master, is nothing less than revolutionary. But even rebellion is not the end. There is still something deeper, something final that ties all of this together. Ether. For beyond rebellion lies truth, not a comfortable truth, but the ultimate realization that changes everything, and that is where we must go next. Imagine this: you have rebelled against the courtroom. You have acted without certainty. You have laughed at the absurdity of your own spirals. You have redirected your gaze outward, embraced your shadow, practiced forgetting. Slowly, you've loosened the chains of awareness. And yet, when the dust settles, one question still lingers in the silence. What now? If you are no longer enslaved by awareness, what is left of you? Who are you? Beyond the reflections, beyond the mirrors, beyond the endless commentary. Here lies the final paradox, the ultimate truth. A truth both terrifying and liberating. There is no fixed you to be found. The death of the solid self. The reason self-awareness becomes unbearable is because you assumed there was a stable self at its core, waiting to be revealed like a treasure. You thought that if you examined deeply enough, questioned honestly enough, analyzed thoroughly enough, you would uncover the real you, a final, unshakable truth about who you are. But every layer you peeled back revealed another beneath it. Every motive contained a deeper motive. Every certainty dissolved into doubt, and eventually you realized the self you were chasing was a ghost. This is what Sartre meant when he said that existence precedes essence. You are not a fixed entity waiting to be uncovered. You are a being in motion, always becoming. Your self is not something you discover. It is something you create moment by moment, choice by choice, act by act. The unbearable weight of self-awareness comes from trying to pin yourself down when, by nature, you are unpinnable. The river, not the stone. Think of it this way. Most people imagine themselves as a stone, solid, fixed, permanent, and they use awareness like a chisel, trying to sculpt the stone into perfection. But the truth is, you are not a stone at all. You are a river. A river is never the same twice. Its waters flow, shift, change course. To demand that the river remain fixed is madness. To scrutinize the river for its true shape is futility. Its truth is its movement. This is you. Awareness does not reveal a solid self. It reveals a river that cannot be frozen. The rebellion, then, was only the preparation. The ultimate truth is acceptance. You are not here to find yourself. You are here to live yourself. The freedom of emptiness. At first, this realization feels like death. If there is no solid you, then what anchors you? What holds you steady in the storm of existence? But here is the secret. The death of the fixed self is not an end, it is a beginning. When you stop clinging to the illusion of a permanent self, you become free to transform. You stop demanding purity, and you start embracing possibility. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and you start asking, "Who am I choosing to become?" Now, in this moment. This is terrifying, yes, but it is also liberation. Because if you are not fixed, then nothing is final. Your past does not define you. Your mistakes do not cage you. Your spirals do not own you. You are always a work in progress, unfinished, unfinalized, alive. The emptiness of the self is not a void, it is space. Infinite, open, spacious. And in that space, you can create. The mirror shattered. Picture yourself standing before that hall of mirrors once more. For years you were trapped in it, watching your reflections multiply, critiquing each one, drowning in the infinite regress. But now, instead of searching for the real you in the reflections, you lift your hand and shatter the glass. The mirrors fall away, and suddenly there is no endless hall, only open air. You realize that the mirrors were never the truth. They were only images, and once they are gone, you are left not with an answer, but with a freedom, the freedom to look forward without needing to see yourself from every angle. The self-awareness spiral collapses not because you solved it, but because you let it go, becoming the creator. Nietzsche once declared, "Man is something that shall be overcome. What have you done to overcome him?" He was not speaking of overcoming humanity in the literal sense, but of overcoming the illusion of the fixed self, the passive creature who waits for meaning to be handed down. To Nietzsche, the highest act was creation. To become not merely the product of forces, society, biology, trauma, but to shape oneself into something new, to live as an artist lives, turning existence itself into art. And here lies the final truth. Self-awareness is not your prison if you use it as your brush. Instead of dissecting yourself endlessly, you can create yourself endlessly. Awareness, wielded properly, is not analysis, it is canvas, it is raw material, it is clay. You are not meant to find yourself, you are meant to make yourself. The eternal return. But there is one final test. Nietzsche called it the eternal return. Imagine, he said, that you must live this life again and again in its every detail, forever. Would you despair, or would you embrace it? For the over-aware, this thought is terrifying. To repeat the spirals, the doubts, the paralysis, forever. The thought crushes you. But if you take the ultimate truth into your hands, if you accept the fluid, creative nature of your being, then the eternal return becomes a challenge, not a curse. It asks you, can you live in such a way that you would will your life to repeat? Can you embrace yourself not as a fixed entity, but as a perpetual act of creation worth affirming again and again? This is the true freedom, when awareness no longer condemns you, but dares you. The final image, so here you stand. Not a prisoner in a hall of mirrors, not a defendant in an endless courtroom, not a broken creature dissecting its own motives. You are standing in an open field, the sky above vast and indifferent, the grue and beneath shifting and alive. You feel the weight of awareness still. It has not disappeared. But now it is no longer a chain. It is a tool, a fire you can carry, a light you can aim. You realize there is no final answer to the question, who am I? Because the question itself dissolves. The truth is not in finding yourself, it is in living yourself, not as stone, but as river, not as prisoner, but as creator. And so the ultimate truth is this. You are not something to be solved, you are something to be lived. The awareness that once consumed you now becomes your companion, your witness, your reminder, not to shrink, not to analyze endlessly, but to live boldly, dangerously, authentically, to stumble and rise, to break and create, to dance with your shadow and laugh at your spirals. And maybe, just maybe, to live in such a way that when the eternal return whispers its challenge, you can look back at your life, not as a problem solved, but as a work of art created, and say, yes, again.